Hi, everybody.
Wow, we're a long way from one another.
I know. Hello, Tom.
Hello.
Okay, let's see.
Can move that closer.
Get a little closer.
We can't move it.
It's very close.
There we go.
There we are. Okay, thanks for coming this morning.
No, pleasure. Thank you for spending the time with me as well.
Yeah. How is it going at GV?
It's great. We're having a good time. So we've been in Europe now for 5 years. The time's flown by. The market's changed a lot since we initially came, but I think, with over 20 investments in Europe now, we're pretty much on plan for what we were hoping to achieve. And most importantly, the early stage businesses and the sort of Series A businesses we see in Europe now, I think are better quality than they ever have been since I started investing here 10 years ago.
I know that, actually in that time, there's been sort of an interesting evolution at Google, of course, too.
Yeah.
We had Google and Alphabet. And then you had things kind of moving around in one area and the other. GV sits in Alphabet, not in Google. It no longer is called Google Ventures, it's called GV.
Exactly.
Google's also developed, there's Gradient, there's Google Capital, there is GV, there is sometimes just Google. How is that going for you guys?
Yeah, it's like,
does that confuse people, and does it confuse you sometimes?
It confuses me less than it did in the past. I feel comfortable with sometimes the little bit of ambiguity, but to give you guys just 30 seconds on how it's structured, I think of Alphabet's investing as strategic, in which case it happens through corp dev, corporate development. So when they acquire companies like DeepMind or alternatively YouTube, that happens through corp dev. And then you have financial investing. And the two main financial investing funds are Capital G, which is private equity stage, mainly focused on the US and Asia. Occasionally I'll look at stuff with them in Europe.
Capital G is what used to be Google Capital.
Yeah, exactly, private equity, and then us, Google Ventures, or GV now, as part of that kind of rebrand. And we're focused on Europe and the US. So we're 80 people. We invest about a third life science, 2/3 in tech. And we've just year on year since it was spun out of Google in 2009, have just been increasing more and more each year.
Are you guys, I know that when GV, when it was still Google Ventures, first set down roots in this part of the world, there was a big group of you. It's gotten quite narrowed down now. How has that impacted your sort of resonance in the market and so on? Has that made it harder, or do you feel like you need to bulk up again, or are you happy not being bulked up?
Good question. I guess the biggest change is when we launched in Europe, we launched as a separate European fund, and we found very quickly that our US partners wanted to co-invest in, I think, 6 out of our first 7 European deals. I won't say which the one they didn't want to co-invest in was.
Yeah, which one was that?
I can't tell you that.
Is that company still alive?
It is still alive, revealingly.
Did they miss the boat on it?
No, I just think it was sort of priorities. But the signal there, which was important, is actually they wanted to co-invest. And so we quickly switched to be one global fund. And so I see myself as part of a global team. We have, this week we have a design team coming through. We had communications team and PR recently, a couple of weeks ago. And so we're very joined up. And actually, I've invested in a couple of US companies myself.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that the analogy is for TechCrunch. We've got our office in San Francisco. And then we have essentially a fairly small outpost here. But when you think about what TechCrunch is, it's literally writers distributed all over the world. We're really dispersed and really decentralized. We're on the blockchain.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds analogous in that most of, and you guys will experience
this. I still feel very much a part of it. So,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's the challenge. And as you guys scale organizations, you quickly see one of the hardest things to do is to make sure you feel like one company when you scale beyond one office. And the bigger the time zone, the harder that is. So, we use Slack that helps with that. We've played about with things like having a live video feed of the other offices to remind people in Mountain View that it's literally midnight in London. There's all sorts of other stuff we've tried, but you're a very distributed team.
Yes, so we're very blockchain. I just said just one small thing. I don't notice that we have a time. Oh, yes, we do. Okay, great. Okay. Just to make sure that we don't go over. Okay, so now, given that you guys have such a small team here, how is that, I wanted to sort of ask you about how that impacts your workflow. So I'm assuming you get a ton of inbound. You probably don't spend a lot of time needing to, I bet you do spend a lot of time looking for the good things, but you must get a ton of noise. So how is that? And how do you, for the founders out here, what would you say is the best piece of advice you can give in terms of how to reach Tom in the best possible way?
Yeah, so look, venture capital is 3 jobs. It's sourcing new deals, selecting the ones you're going to invest in, and then supporting those. And roughly my time is kind of a third, a third, a third. But you can imagine, it's kind of like buses. It comes in surges where suddenly everyone's fundraising and I might be focused on selection and due diligence. I can, in terms of inbound, to give you an idea, we probably receive 50 to 100 inbound opportunities, kind of unvetted per week, just from Europe. We end up investing in a maximum of about 5 per year, to give you an idea. So it's a very steep-sided funnel. Now, there's certain stuff that we just don't even look at. Like, one of the biggest ones, I cannot explain to you how many times I receive an email that is so obviously generic that clearly there's been no effort paid in and it's just a mail shot. The extreme of that is a lot of founders will use actual mailing, like MailChimp equivalent, newsletter systems to send out pitches to all VCs at once. That for me, like if a pitch has an unsubscribe button at the bottom, then I'm hitting unsubscribe. Rule number 1. The next one, which I see all the time, is basic typos and just sloppiness. And I'm not a pedant for kind of the written English, but it just shows time. And then I guess the third one, which is the time that I get very excited about pitches, is when it's demonstrably empathic, where the entrepreneur understands the customer, and I can see, and actually likes the customer. I would say entrepreneurs disliking their customers is probably the biggest leading indicator of failure. So I like to see pitches that demonstrate that these people have a kind of unique perspective on a customer problem that they care about. Then I dig in.
So it sounds to me, though, the theme between all of those is that they're all on email?
Yeah, I would say most, by volume, most are email. There are some that, the entrepreneurs that network their way in so that they figure out who I've co-invested with, or the founders that I've backed. When they come in through those sources, I will always look at it because that's my kind of trusted network. And I think that's true for most VCs. Like you have certain people that you will always take an intro from and you'll always grab a coffee.
Have you ever had anyone doorstop you?
Yeah.
Cycle next to you on your way to work?
Yeah, I have.
Tom!
I've had that one's okay. The worst one is our assistant, if she's in the office on her own and then an entrepreneur is literally pounding on the door wanting to pitch. That can be quite intimidating for her. But it's happened a few times. That's rare. I think one of the most creative ones I ever had was someone pitching me in a coffee queue. And that was genius because I was a captive audience for 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah, I had somebody send me a popcorn machine last week.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
With corn?
Streaming startup, sorry?
Obviously, streaming startup. I quite like that. That's good. Did you write about them?
No. I have the same issue you have, which is that we have like a ridiculous, I've really embarrassingly over hundreds of thousands of unread emails because when I do something like this, it means I'm not sitting at my desk and reading email. So how do I do it?
How do you filter?
It's actually very random for me. So I do try to scan all my emails. Sometimes something will jump out at me. It's more a timing thing for me. Do I happen to be sitting at my email when something interesting comes through? I actually feel like the thing is it's not like, the frustrating thing for me is that the proportion of interesting to non-interesting does not correlate to the amount of stuff that you have. So I think it's more a time correlation for me. So I think that actually there's probably about 50% of the stuff I get I would probably be interested in pursuing. I will never have enough time to do that. So it's not that I probably only write about a couple of % of the stuff that we get coming in, pitched to me. But that's not because there's only a couple of % of interest. It's not like my hit rate is based on the most interesting things. It's based on the things that I happen to see. It's a really sucky sucky situation. I wish it were better.
Not meritocratic.
Yeah, I wish it were better, and I think that if we could hire more people, like, you know, if I could clone myself or something, I would just want us to do more of what we're doing rather than...
Makes sense.
Yeah. So the selectivity is not necessarily an organic one based on the... Anyway. Okay, I'm going to shift to something else here. You, of course, came into VC having worked at a company, at IDEO. A lot of people go from VC back into the entrepreneurial world. Are you ever going to do that?
I might do. I loved operating and building businesses. It was an amazing kind of point of leverage. And I'm still very involved with IDEO. I enjoy that, and I'm still involved with a couple of the companies that I founded. So I still have that. I may go back into it, but at the moment, this is an amazing kind of point of leverage as well. I think IDEO taught me so much useful stuff about building businesses. I was a better entrepreneur having been at IDEO than before. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the kind of design thinking approach, but we can quickly whiz through some of the main building blocks if it's interesting, but it certainly made me a better entrepreneur.
If you went out and did that again, what area would you look at?
I would dig into, so I have a passion for life science at the moment. Every year, you can imagine, being a VC is like having a fire hose pointed at you. I get imposter syndrome pretty much every day because I'd feel completely unqualified to be judging people smarter than me like you guys about your ideas. So to try and get a little bit smarter, I will pick a topic and be proactive each year. So I did computer vision last year, I did blockchain the year before, I did genomics the year before that, and every time we've done a few investments on the back of one of these deep dives. I think the one I would I'd love to dive into if I was kind of going again. I studied physics, and I think I would look at the intersect of disciplines and maybe physics or mathematics coupled with biology is super interesting.
Okay, that's great. That's interesting. I'm going to ask you about that now. So before, we just had half term, the schools were on their break, and I went off to France, and you very kindly passed on Bad Blood to me. Have you guys read Bad Blood? It's really good. I recommend it very much. It's about Theranos. It's really, really... It's
a brilliant story.
Gripping. Yeah.
And actually, as a VC, it's great to read it because it reminds you of the most common mistakes made. Like, as an entrepreneur and a VC, one of the biggest challenges is confirmation bias. You just constantly look for reasons or ways to prove that you're right. And in a world where basically people will tell you anything and there's so much data, then you can always find reasons to be right. The really smart entrepreneurs are a bit more paranoid and are occasionally saying, why might I be wrong? And forcing themselves to think like that. And I think, you know, there's an argument the Theranos story teaches us that there wasn't enough of that challenging perspective in the room. There certainly wasn't the technical expertise. I mean, we looked at it actually, Theranos, as an investment in the US. And for us, it was a quick pass. I mean, I can tell you why. Yeah.
Could you spot the holes in it right away?
Yeah, well, I mean, we did. So many of you will have heard the expression, eat your own dog food. We as entrepreneurs should always use their own product. Like, I have spoken to the boards of banks before where they don't even use their own product. They use a high-end private banking service instead. That is a terrible sign. We all have to eat our own dog food. And as investors, we therefore should be trying the product, trying the service. Like, it's insane that you'd invest in something without trying it, but it happens all the time. So in this case, one of our life science team in the US went to get their blood drawn, and sure enough, they were called back 3 times for more blood, which was a pretty bad sign. So that was a quick pass.
Okay, that's interesting. So I would just say that was definitely one of the kind of takeaways from that. But the other was that there's a lot of, you know, money thrown at it by people and you know, just endorsements by people who didn't really know. You know, they're investing in an area. I've actually never really delved really deep into writing about biotech, one of the reasons why is not because we don't get pitched about that stuff, because we really do get a ton of those. But I've always felt like I don't really know enough about this to really, and it seems like a really essential thing to not get wrong, because we're talking about people here. It's not the same thing as saying, well, that bot doesn't really do the chatting the way it's supposed to, it's like kind of like very wonky chat bot. It's actually like telling you whether you have prostate cancer or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's a reason why I've never done it, but that presumably must happen at the VC level too, in terms of investing. How are you guys, now, GV has done a ton in life sciences and medical stuff. How are you making sure you're not investing in more Theranos type companies? Like, what is your way of doing that?
Yeah, so fortunately, and this is not just true of life sciences, we have a network. We occasionally lean on the Alphabet network. There's 2 life science companies, Calico and Verily. But more importantly, we have an unbelievably good life science team internally, including venture partners that are only with us part-time, that stay at the cutting edge of their fields. And actually, the same's true of cybersecurity. In these markets,
yeah, that's another big
like
one.
the exciting ones, the markets are changing unbelievably quickly. So we're reluctant to pull people out from the edge of a discipline, and actually their knowledge kind of expires. It's a bit ephemeral. Instead, we make sure that we involve people that stay at the cutting edge.
Yeah, so you think that you're able to avoid those?
I hope so, to be determined.
Okay, we're out of time.
Okay.
I could talk to you longer, of course.
No.
Another time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take our glasses.